Hello everyone, Ember Power here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one I'm going to be doing an update video for Lechonk League, for Fossils and Scarlet and Violet. So, for those of you who don't know, just a quick recap for Lechonk League. Decks are constructed with a minimum of 12 Pokemon, but no more than 4 of each type. It's singleton Pokemon special energy rules. Decks are built from a card pool of low HP cheap mons, so Lechonk for example. It's based on Mini League format, if you're more familiar with that, which was an event that took place in December. You can't play more than 2 of each trainers, and the full card pool and recommend Pokemon, as well as like a theoretical under review Pokemon, are all on the previous Lechonk League video. So that's just a brief recap if you're unfamiliar with the format. Basically, in the big update, there are 48 new Pokemon, 5 new trainers, and it's also going to be a fossil update at the end. But of course, if you want to check out the full card pool, you'll unfortunately have to look at the previous video. I would have included more Pokemon in this video, but unfortunately, it's just like it interferes with the video quality quite a lot already. So yeah, it's a bit unfortunate, but basically it means I just can't put too many Pokemon cards in a single video. But as for Scarlet and Violet, there's a couple of new trainers that are worth talking about. Arven is a pretty big one for the format because it can tutor out an item, which I believe is the only supporter card that can actually do that in this format because there's no Arida. Also, being able to find a tool card is also really nice. There's also Katie, which is a little bit slow because it ends your turn if you play it, but being able to shuffle your hand into your deck and drawing 8 cards is massive, so pretty decent supporter. There's also Team Star Grunt, which essentially replaces Team Flare Grunt until, Pokemon get their act together and add the full expanded format to Pokemon TCG Live, so that's pretty decent. There's also Beach Court to improve the treat cost of all the basics in the format, as well as Messagoza, which will allow players to once in your turn flip a coin if heads, search your deck for Pokemon. And because Pokemon search is extremely limited in the Lechonk League, a stadium like Messagoza is super useful and, worth including. So if we just go into the new Pokemon, in terms of grass types, there's a decent amount being added. There's a Shroomish, Scatterbug, Skitto, Sprigatito, Tarantula, 3 of them, Toedscool, 2 Toedschools, and a Capsicid. So I'd say like the most interesting out of all these evolutions is going to be something like the Tarantulas, because although 2 of them have 40 HP, attacks like String Hole and String Shot are pretty decent, just allowing you to do potential Paralysis or potential Gust, so something worth bearing in mind. As for like the fire types, nothing too crazy, although Fuecoco having 80 HP and being able to do 50 damage for 3 energy, it's a pretty expensive attack, but obviously 50 damage is an awful lot in this format. You're going to be KOing some Pokemon, and with some modifiers potentially, then you can get even higher. So Fuecoco is pretty decent. Charcadet is a very efficient attacker, doing 30 damage for 1 energy, but you will have to discard the fire energy attached to it, so that's kind of a pain in that regard. But still, Ember is definitely not the worst attack, especially when you can 2-hit KO most 60 HP basics. There's also a Magikarp, which has an okay attack. It's like flip a coin of heads, does 10 damage snipe. It's not the best Magikarp in the format by any means, but it's certainly not the worst. There's also a Buizel, a Clauncher, a Quaxley, a Wiglet that can potentially give itself immunity from damage, another Wiglet, which is mill 1 on a coin flip, a Cetadol, which has 100 HP, which is an awful lot for any Pokemon to have in this format. Also does 60 damage for 3 energy with Sharp Fin, so super powerful card, but unfortunately has a retreat cost of 3, so if it gets stuck in the active early game, that could be really problematic. There's a Magnemite that's pretty versatile. There's a Marip as well, a Rotom that has decent sniping capabilities, also a Junk Hunter Rotom that can also do Paralysis, and a Toxel. Then there is some additional lightning types as well. There's 2 Pawmies and 2 Waterals. The Waterall that can also draw a card is also decent because I think there's like limited draw power with lightning types, so that's something worth bearing in mind. As for the psychic types, I think these are like the most interesting in the format currently. Drowsy has 4 sleep, which is really decent. Shuppet has potential item lock while also doing 10 damage. Klefki can turn off abilities while also discarding tool cards. Fido and the Flittles are like a bit bit bland to be honest in terms of card design. But the Graveyard does 10 damage for each Psychic Pokemon in your discard pile. So theoretically, you could get 3 Pokemon in there and swing for 30 damage. So definitely not like the worst attacker in the world, and certainly decent in the late game, especially thanks to its high resistance to fighting as well as 70 HP. But speaking of fighting types, we have 4 new ones: Meditite, 2 Riolus, and a Sandile. Sandile is pretty decent, 2 fighting energy for 30 damage is really solid. Also, Riolu doing 50 for 2 energy, but it will do 20 to itself, so you will have limited uses of that attack. But being able to do 50 damage is really solid, so pretty interesting to see. We also have a Spiritomb with Doom Decree, which could potentially knock a Pokemon out, but you will need to flip 2 heads. There's also Croagunk, which can do 40 for 3. And then Pawniard and Mastiff aren't terribly crazy. In fact, they're almost identical. Pawniard having 1 retreat cost less does mean it'll have the edge over Mastiff, but still worth considering if you prefer that Pokemon. There's also only 1 new metal type from Scarlet and Violet, and that is the Varoom that does poison. Nothing too crazy, but it will give metal types at least that option, especially if you're playing like a poison deck that maybe needs a metal type because it's easier to find with a certain trainer card, for example, then it could be useful. Just saying, could be useful. Also, the Squirvet, which has the amazing ability Nest Dash, which allow you to shuffle your hand, put them on the bottom of your deck, and then draw 1 card, which doesn't seem super crazy, but if you play out your hand full of items, which is kind of common in the Lechonk League because supporters are a bit harder to find, having something like Nest Dash as a backup move is really decent. Squirvet can also attack, of course, 20 damage for 2 colorless energy, so it's very easy to tech in. There's also a new Tandemaus, which does 20 damage for 1 colorless energy, only has 30 HP, which is pretty grim, but still an option to consider. And there's also a Starly that does 20 damage for a single energy. So that's it for Scarlet and Violet, but what about fossils? Now, unfortunately, none of these cards are currently usable on TCG Live except Bill's Maintenance. I believe, yeah, Bill's Maintenance is from Sun and Moon, so that would be okay. But all these other cards you currently cannot play on TCG Live, which is super unfortunate, but they're all pretty decent. So hopefully when Pokemon TCG Live developers get their act together, and of course we do get the X and Y cards, these cards will be usable in the Lechonk League. So Fossil Excavation Kit basically allows you to recycle the Old Ember Aerodactyls, as well as the Plume Fossils and Root Fossil Lileep, I believe. Or it's just the Kabutops. Alright, I thought Fossil Excavation actually found Lileep as well as Plume, but apparently it's just for Omnite, Kabutops, and Old Amber. So Fossil Excavation will only recycle Old Amber. So what does Old Amber do? It says look at the bottom 7 cards of your deck, sorry. You may reveal an Aerodactyl you find there and put it onto your bench. And then Aerodactyl has 90 HP, which is very high for this format. And it has the ability Ancient Scream. It says your Pokemon do plus 10 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. And its wing attack, does 40 for 3 colors. So honestly, just a very solid card overall. Obviously, like nothing too crazy. This would be pretty underwhelming if this was like normal expanded, but because it's such a smaller format where, you know, if we look back, a lot of these Pokemon are doing so little damage anyway. Being able to combo that with Aerodactyl is really decent. Of course, you can only play 2 copies of Old Amber, but being able to play 2 copies of the Excavation Kit is also pretty solid. If you want some additional support from fossils though, there's a grass one in the form of Lileep, which has 80 HP, so a bit less, and it has the ability Prehistoric Call. Once in your turn, if this Pokemon is on your discard pile, you may put this card on the bottom of your deck, so you can actually recycle Lileep and use it throughout the game. Same with Archon. Also, Spiral Drain doing 20 damage and healing 10 damage from this Pokemon is pretty decent because healing is far and few between. As for Archon, has the same ability, Prehistoric Call, and then Wing Attack does 20 damage for 2 colors. So pretty solid Pokemon overall. As for Amura, is that how you pronounce her name? Amura, 90 HP, and then Stampede and Aurora Beam. Aurora Beam does do 50 for 3, which is pretty solid, so something worth considering for water types. And then Bill's Maintenance says shuffle a card from your hand into your deck. If you do, draw 3 cards. So just another way to draw 3 cards in this format. So there is some additional cards that I've selected and added. I think some of these might have been in the list originally, but I wanted to double check and make sure they were in this one. So there is a bunch of new supporters actually. There's Evelyn and Nita, which are part of the Hat Ladies. Evelyn says you can only play this card if your opponent's active as a stage 1. Currently, I think there are no stage 1s that can be played on TCG Live that are in the Lechonk League. There is several from the set XY Evolutions. There's a Gyarados and a Raticate. So if they were to become really solid, because I think they're pretty balanced cards for this format, then Evelyn is pretty decent, being able to draw 4 cards. There's also Nita that says you can only play this if your opponent's active as a basic. And most of the format is used with basics anyway, and then the occasional stage 1. And that says put an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon onto the top of their deck. So it's actually just another copy of Team Star Grunt, effectively. So you can play 4 copies of Team Star Grunt. We also added Beauty, which says if you go first, you may play this card on your first turn, draw 2 cards. It's not the worst, not the best, but it's okay. We also have Rosanna's Backup, which allows you to choose 1 or more. So you can shuffle a Pokemon from your discard pile into your deck, shuffle a tool card, shuffle a stadium, and shuffle an energy card. So very decent recovery, and there's very, very limited recovery currently in the Chonk League, so having something like Rosanna's Backup is very strong. Then there's Erica. Each player may draw up to 3 cards. You draw first, which is pretty decent. Janae allows you to look at the top 4. You take 2, and then you shuffle the other ones back in. Misty's Water Command is a little bit of energy movement between Psyducks, Horseys, and Staryus, Magikarps, and Gyarados. And then Brock's Training is energy acceleration for Geodude, Graveler, and Golem, Cubone, Rhyhorn, Rhydon, and any Sudowoodos that could eventually make it in. There's also Bug Catcher, which is okay draw power. Red's Challenge is probably the best new supporter, to be honest. You have to discard 2 cards from your hand, but you can tutor out any 1 card. So it's essentially like Computer Search from back in the day, but a very solid supporter overall. There's also Giovanni's Exile, discard up to 2 of your bench Pokemon that have no damage counters on them and all cards attached to them, which is pretty decent if you just want to free up some bench space. There's also Lily's Full Force, which allows you to draw 4 cards, which is very strong, but at the end of your turn, if you have 3 or more cards in your hand, shuffle cards from your hand into your deck until you have 2 cards in your hand. So it's basically like if you hope to draw loads of items, then you'd play this card. So high item count deck, definitely play Lily's Full Force. We're just looking to the future. There's going to be a Paldea Evolved update, of course. Right now, I don't really want to do that vid because we don't know all the cards that are going to be cut from Paldea Evolved. There's also going to be a full set reveal for Pokemon Card 151 at some point during May, I presume, like halfway through May. So we should see a Lechonk League update for that set whenever it do come out. There's also going to be a deck profile sooner rather than later, covering a standard version of Lechonk League, essentially. So if you're looking forward to that, then that's coming out. There's also going to be some gameplay, hopefully. So I'm looking for volunteers who potentially want to test out the format with me, just to see if there's anything crazy in standard that needs to be taken care of, i.e. the graveyard or whatever. So if you're interested in doing matches with Lechonk League, then do let me know. Also, potential event at some point in soonish or in July. It's probably looking more like July in hindsight because I'm aware that not many people know about this format or maybe are interested currently. So the idea is to build up more interest over time and then hopefully we can get enough people to do an event for it, basically. And then more black and white cards, including Team Plasma, will be added if Live adds expanded. So way back when I first conceptualized this format, I picked out a whole bunch of black and white cards that I'd really like to be in the format, including some ones from Team Plasma. Unfortunately, because Live doesn't have the full expanded, there's no real point in covering them currently, but I will do that when, Live actually adds them. But yeah, this has been Ember Power. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any queries or questions about Lechonk League, do let me know in the comment section. And yeah, it's been Ember Power, and thank you for watching.